Well, hello everyone. My name is Mark Kowal, and I'm in product marketing at Quiq, and I'm here with three of my colleagues here, John Anderson, one of our AI engineers, and Max Fortis, one of our product managers here at Quiq. And we're here because we want to be able to deliver a webinar that is certainly based on our AI studio. And it's really about accelerating your agentic AI deployments. And so what we're going to do is walk through a number of slides and then get right into a demo so that you can see what AI Studio is like and be able to understand exactly how you can do and accomplish some of the tasks that we have in front of us. So let's just start by going over what we're going to be talking about here. And the first thing we want to do is sometimes the terminology can throw people off. And so agentic AI is a little bit of a newer term, and we want to be able to go through, explain that to you, and give you the definitions that Quiq likes to see in agentic AI and share that with you. And we also realize that a lot of the companies out there right now are looking at trying to decide whether they should build or buy. And in that process, there's several benefits and challenges with each decision that you make. We want to go through some of the typical timelines and really explain what an enterprise-ready solution is and why it's so critical to any deployment that is going to be released. The next section will be given on introducing AI Studio and the Quiq process in general. Since we have John Anderson here to walk through it, he's going to be able to give you some live examples of what it takes in order to do this and show just how AI Studio can rapidly improve the deployment of your AI agents. And then finally, we're going to wrap it up and we'll be able to go from there. So the first slide that we're going to look at here now is on agentic AI. And like I said, it can be confusing to some people. A lot of people throw it out and they mean different things by it. So I think it's best just to level set, explain what does agentic AI mean and break it down from there. Now, when you look at the definition of agentic AI, Quiq really is going to provide all you need to integrate agentic AI into your enterprise. That's the bottom line. Agentic AI, what it really means is that it can independently decide what actions to take. It persists in completing tasks and adapts its approach based on outcomes. It's really similar to how human employees work through a problem. It thinks and it can solve. I think a nice way to sum this up is in these 3 points. First, agentic AI can plan and execute multi-step tasks. It can change strategies when the initial approaches don't work. And third, it can make contextual decisions without human guidance. Those 3 items will let you know when you are giving agentic and delivering agentic AI in your enterprise to your customers. Now, at Quiq, we have different ways that we can do this. We deliver agentic AI in 3 different ways. First is through AI agents. AI agents are AI-powered systems that autonomously perform tasks and respond to queries while adapting to the user needs. The second way is through AI assistance. It empowers human agents by automating tasks and suggesting responses so that the human can do it. It helps to give the human guidance and improve service quality. That's AI assistance. And finally, agentic AI services, AI agents that are invoked via APIs and allowing custom AI agents to be incorporated into existing workflows and existing systems. This is how it ties all systems together. Those 3 forms are how Quiq brings out agentic AI. So when you do this, you really want to be able to find a way to deliver agentic AI to your enterprise. And so I'd like to invite Max to come in and step in and explain really what the purpose of an agentic AI platform is and how you can accomplish it.
Sure. So if you want to build and deploy agentic AI on behalf of your company or organization, there's a set of core components and capabilities you're going to need. You're going to need a way to bring in the underlying large language models, and ideally you'll have flexibility to swap out models for different tasks and seamlessly plug and play based on use case or goals or shifting market dynamics. You're going to have different business processes throughout your organization for different teams and different stakeholders that are going to need to be integrated and incorporated into your experience. You're going to need to figure out how to integrate and leverage your data, whether that's company data, internal knowledge bases, customer information, CRMs, product catalog, and anything else. And then you'll need a way to tie all that together through an orchestration layer to actually build, deliver, and measure on the value of your agentic AI experience. In order to do this, you can either buy a solution from a vendor or build a solution in-house, and we'll touch on both of these options and explore some of the trade-offs with each. So we'll start with the pros and cons of actually building a solution yourself. As someone who works closely with the engineering team here at Quiq, I know there are real benefits to building a solution in-house versus buying from a vendor. Generally, when you're building in-house, you're going to want something that's easy to use and isn't fighting you every step of the way, which teams often feel like they can create themselves when choosing to build a solution. You're going to want to be able to test and experiment with a variety of models. Maybe that's your own fine-tuned model or a cutting-edge model, and you don't want to feel like you're locked into a limited set of models that a vendor may offer. When building in-house, you have complete control over what models you're using and when. You're going to want some way to ensure that other team members can contribute to the experience. You don't want to have a single engineer owning the entire project end to end over the course of its lifestyle, because you know priorities are going to shift and resources are probably going to be allocated somewhere else during the course of that project. And if you're at a large org, especially, you're going to want to have some guardrails and tooling in place to ensure that if others are making changes or working off your framework, maybe for their own project, they're following the best practices and not deviating too much. And then on flexibility and customization, you don't want to be limited by what a single vendor offers. That means if you want to build a custom integration into an internal system or want your agent to behave in some specific way, or have a really specific use case in mind, you're not limited by what a platform allows you to do and have the flexibility to build exactly what you want the way you want it. And then lastly, scalability and reliability. You're going to want to ensure that whatever solution you're building in-house is going to be able to scale and meet the enterprise needs of your business. An internal POC is only as good as its weakest link. So ensuring your system can reliably scale across channels, markets, languages, and more is essential to deploying agentic AI on behalf of your business. Now, outside of those needs, there's also a unique set of challenges that can arise when building a solution in-house. So the first, depending on who in your organization is building, you can end up with a bunch of fragmented internal POCs that don't talk to one another, don't share data or learnings, and aren't building off one another in a cohesive way that scales across your org, which inevitably leads to headaches down the road. Next, getting your data AI ready can be really time consuming, especially when you don't have the right tools in place. Whether that's figuring out how to integrate data from a bunch of disparate sources, figuring out how to chunk, transform, and load that data, or just figuring out how to keep it in sync with its original source so you don't have multiple data sets that you end up managing over time. We've also found that prompt engineering is a pretty distinct skill set, as anyone who's worked with these models for any amount of time can attest to. And it's not necessarily the software engineer on your team's core competency or focus, and depending once again on how internal resources get allocated, it can be difficult to bring non-engineering stakeholders into the fold to help take ownership of this project as it evolves, leaving it all on the initial team who built it, which generally isn't sustainable for long-term success. And then you're going to need some way to measure that AI agent performance, observe changes over time, test those changes, whether that's because you've updated the model or added something new to your flow. And you're going to need tooling that enables you to do that with full visibility into what's happening and ideally actually compare what's changed. And John's going to touch on this later during the demo. And lastly, similar to the above, there's a ton that goes into actually building an AI agent outside of just the agent itself. So think scaling across hundreds of thousands or millions of interactions, deploying across modern messaging channels, managing new model deployments, and doing all of this in a safe and secure way with zero downtime.
Max, you covered it really well. There's a lot there when you talked about building a solution. I used to actually be responsible for a services team, and this was some of our methodology. Now, when I look at all the customers that we helped build out solutions, this would be like the best case scenario. We would build this, and there you would see that you need to have an experimentation phase, a build phase, and a scale phase. And these three different components could take, at best, 24 weeks, if not longer. And I won't go through all the steps in each of these, but it's important to recognize there are a lot of components with each of these. And it's because of all this that we have seen customer after customer get locked up and not being able to deploy things. And they can spend even up to a year or more trying to deploy and doing their best that they can, but actually not being able to deploy a solution. This is really what drew me to Quiq, because Quiq had a really great tool called AI Studio that kind of changed this whole dynamic. And so that was one of the reasons I wanted to introduce John and have him show this to us, because when you look at AI Studio, it takes out all those layers. They experiment, build, and scale is all encompassed into AI Studio into one. So now you're going from best case scenario of 24 weeks to a year to be in weeks or months, depending on the application that you're trying to build and what you're trying to accomplish. The bottom line is all of it's included in AI Studio, one tool that can manage it all. That makes a huge difference when you go to deploy this for a particular customer. And when you look at it, one of the biggest challenges is making sure that it's enterprise ready. What does that mean? It means that you have flexible customization. All of what you just discussed, Max, security and compliance ready, scalable, so that it can meet any enterprise need at any time. Things like robust analytics to be able to report and to show your ROI based on your tool and what you are achieving. And finally, a continuous updates and model training that's going to be critical to anybody's success. I think all of these are absolutely critical in delivering a project just like this. Max, do you agree?
Yep. No, that's spot on, Mark.
So, and that becomes wonderful, because what happens is now people are starting to look to either build a solution, which we just went through, or even buying a solution. And when you look at buying a solution, it may sound easier, but there's still a ton of things to consider. For instance, the ease of deployment, ease of development, being able to coordinate across developers and have multiple groups working on certain things. Flexibility and customization, or again, the enterprise ready and scalability, testing, observability, and analytics. And finally, the pre-existing integrations that allow an entire system to come together. This is the challenge that you get even when you go out and try to buy a ready system. Max, what do you think about that? With all these things, we know that there's a lot of challenges. What do you see as some of those challenges
Sure.
that
No.
will be faced?
Yeah, great question, Mark. So we just touched on some of the pitfalls with building your own solution. The same thing applies to buying as well. There are obviously benefits. Let's kind of talk through those. One of the first ones we hear about is going to be around overhyped claims and misleading timelines. So you'll often hear a vendor talk about launching to production in a week, or hey, connect your knowledge base in just minutes. But oftentimes what this really means is you're going to be getting something that's functionally just a proof of concept. It's not going to be hardened for real world scenarios. It won't actually work towards achieving your goals. And it's ultimately just going to leave you and your customers disappointed. So it's important to understand everything that goes into building an AI agent and what you're trying to achieve, and understand how you're going to scale past that initial POC and not limit yourself from future use cases when choosing a vendor. And then the next pain point we often hear about is around hidden costs. So vendors will often lock powerful LLM features or additional rich messaging channel or integration capabilities behind different pricing tiers. So ensuring you know what your total cost is going to be when evaluating vendors. Don't just take them at their word for their cheapest price, because that often won't include core functionality needed to actually deliver a best-in-class experience. And then another big bullet is around data preparation and integration. Your AI agent is only as good as the data it has access to, and preparing and integrating data from disparate sources is a key part of building out agentic AI, but it's often something that vendors will overlook or pass off to you to manage, meaning you may be able to connect your knowledge base in minutes, but you've got weeks of work to do to clean it up and get it AI ready, since the vendor has chosen to outsource that work to you. So it's important to make sure you choose a vendor that enables you to manage and work with your data in a seamless way. Another bucket we often hear about is around an inflexible product that can't really meet enterprise needs. So one of the strong reasons folks consider actually building a solution on their own is that vendors will often limit what you can do with LLMs, whether that's based on use cases, meaning, hey, we're only going to let you generate answers from a knowledge base, or because they only offer off-the-shelf integrations that aren't going to meet your enterprise needs, or lack the model support that you need as a large enterprise. So when evaluating vendors, it's important to choose a platform with an open architecture, an API-first approach, and the requisite level of customization required for your current use case and for future scenarios to make sure you've picked the right vendor moving forward as well. And then another pain point we hear about is around difficulty scaling. So that's going to be the inability to meet the needs of a global enterprise business. This can be because they lack the requisite measurements and analytics tools to actually measure and improve performance over time, or because they lack the infrastructure that enables you to deploy to new markets, new languages, and handle those with ease.
Great point. There is just not a really clear-cut solution out there. But this is why I wanted to bring John in to explain that whether you're going to build or buy, we would love for you to consider AI Studio, because what AI Studio does is it takes your process and simplifies it down to 4 main steps. And so, John, I'd like to introduce you to walk through these 4 steps and then and show everybody just how you can do this with the AI Studio tool.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about building an agent, an AI agent, the first thing we think about is the grounding it in truth and what kind of data or knowledge it's going to be based on. So that first step is getting your data ready to use in an AI agent. So that's really step one, is that kind of the upfront data work. And step two, once we've got that data ready, we're going to build the agent. So this is everything from prompts to which language models you're going to use, to the guardrails, to the business rules, all of that. And we'll get into AI Studio here in a minute, and I'll show you what that kind of all looks like. But we want to ensure contextual understanding and reliability as we're building this agent on top of that data that we transformed in step one. From there, we're going to move to testing and observability. So these things are iterative, right? You're not building it, deploying it, and then never touching it again. In fact, you're constantly iterating, both during the development cycle and then post-launch as well. And so having these testing and observability tools is critical to be able to understand what's happening in an agent so that you can make sure it's doing what you want and what it's intended to do. And then from there, step 4 is really, it goes kind of hand in hand, especially with step 2, as you're thinking about how to build and what you want that build to look like and the architecture of an agent build. You're also thinking about what KPIs are important for your business. What things do you need to track in your business? And then in building in a way that you can report on those. So a reporting platform that goes along with it to help you see what's happening in an agent and give you actionable action items that help you move on from there. So we're going to first talk about that step 1, that data transformation step, where we're getting data. We might have it in any number of formats. It might be we've had PDFs or CSVs or web scraping or knowledge-based integrations, whatever that looks like. We need to talk about how to get it ready to use for a production AI agent. So the very first thing that we're going to do when we come in, we're going to read the data, we're going to look at it. As an AI engineer, I need to understand what the data looks like so that I can know what I want to end up doing with it. So once I've done that, I want to get it I want to format it to be just honestly more readable for a language model. A lot of times what we find is that if it's more readable for a human, it's also more readable for a language model, just in terms of how it's using it. So that might be a combination of things. It might be chunking it or grouping the data together in an intuitive way. So you might have some articles that are a paragraph and some that are 12 paragraphs. You want to kind of normalize that. You also want to be able to format it. Maybe you're stripping out HTML tags or other elements that sometimes add noise. And then on the other side of that, maybe you're adding a little bit of structure. Maybe you've got a long run-on of sentences and you just need to kind of add a little bit of structure in there. We've had customers work with us that need to rewrite what is effectively an internal employee facing knowledge base and get it ready for customer facing. So you might say things differently or word things differently or use different language in doing that. So you might also rewrite the data during this kind of transformation process. And then lastly, data enrichment is a thing that we talk about and think about a lot here. How can I make my data more ready for use in an AI agent by enriching it with some additional metadata or things that we pull out, topics that we pull out from a given article. And all of that goes into the vector embeddings and the search keys and all of these things that help you get not only related and relevant data into the agent, but also help it know how to use that data. So at a high level, what we've got is just the transformations part of the tool, part of AI Studio is what we call it. And I can do a mix of, I can go to an LLM, I can choose any model I want here. And we'll talk about that when we're building the agent as well. But if you're using a GPT model or Claude or Gemini or whatever it might be, a Llama model, we can do all that. So you're going to use some steps are going to be LLM calls. Some steps are just going to be just deterministic functions here in Python that we're going to use to kind of create that search key and things like that. I went ahead and hit this test button a minute ago before I got on screen just to save you needing to watch it process for 20 seconds here. What I've got on the left here is my first document. So I ran a test with 5 documents. This is what it comes in looking. So maybe this is, this is direct from your knowledge base or direct from your website in this case, right? We've scraped a page and got this. And you can see HTML tags here and everything else. And what we want to do is we want to start to strip that out. So the very first step, and you can see it here, I've got this clarify step. And if I come in and see in the code, I can see exactly what I'm asking the language model to do. This is where you'll still start to see some prompting. Your job is to carefully review the article and extract it in its human readable format. You might want to remove HTML tags, those kinds of things. And then what we can see is that we went from kind of this HTML document to a clarified statement or a clarified article. It's a lot easier for me to read. It's also going to be easier and more useful for the language model to read. So we can do any number of steps doing things like that. The next 2 here, entities and questions, we're really just creating metadata. So first we added this entities where we're asking it to give us some kind of like top level hits of what's being discussed in the article, and then questions. We're asking it what kinds of questions could a user ask that would be answered by this article. And so this data enrichment, what it does is it allows us to improve the semantic search with the vector database. We're not going to use this kind of generated data in actually answering a question, but we're going to use it to get to the right article so that we can answer the question. And then lastly, we're going to kind of combine all those things. And this is what we'll end up searching for in the semantic, in the vector database semantically. And so by taking our data from kind of this unstructured or kind of harder to look at HTML file, and then we cleaned it up, we transformed it, we added to it with some metadata, and then ultimately we got it into a spot that's going to be ready for an AI agent to use. So once we've got that part of things set, we can hook this transformed data into a search resource that we're going to use here in an AI agent. So this is step 2, moving right into it, the building of the agent. And I understand I have a big screen. We're zoomed out pretty far. I know you can't read all of this, and that's totally fine. I just want to be able to show you at a high level what we're talking about when we're talking about building an AI agent. So we basically go from left to right here, and this is part of this is what I would call our pipeline here. It's filled with prompts, business rules, LLM calls, API calls, conditional rules, knowledge and guidelines, all of that stuff that kind of makes up what an AI agent should do is housed in here. And so this is where we're going to orchestrate the conversation from when the user first comes in until they leave. So that from the entry door to the exit door, what do we do at any given time with the user, and how do we help them get to the answers and the actions that they need? So apologies, I zoom in here. We're going to have a little bit of like pre-processing here when a user comes in. Then we're going to do a little bit of planning. So we'll get into, I'll show what we do here grab the information that we need from that transformed data. And then as we start to talk about agentic AI, this has been a really fun development, and that what we've done is we've given the AI agent more agency in terms of what it can do and what we expect of it. So previously, you might have asked it to do one particular task given a business rule. Now what we can do is we can say, here's a set of business rules. Here's a set of information that you have. Here's knowledge from the knowledge base. And here are all these things that you could choose to do. And in doing so, we give it agency to choose what the next step is. And then we give it guidance on what to do in that step. And so I'll show a little bit of that here in a minute. Then we've got some guardrailing here, where we're going to not only check at the beginning, we do some pre-process filtering where we're checking whether what the user has said, is it acceptable? Is it in scope for this business? Is it a sensitive topic? Or do they have a complaint? Are they asking to talk to an agent right away? Once we kind of classify that, we run through everything, we generate an answer. But before we send that answer off to the end user, we need to check it again. So even though we've gone through this whole step of rules and we've told it to do all of these things, and this obviously, my explanation of it is taking way longer than what happens at inference time. It's a few seconds. But what we want to do is before we send it to a user, we want to check to make sure that everything it's saying is true, that it's factual, that it's been verified. And then once that's all true, we'll actually go ahead and send the answer in this align answer node here. And then from there, we can kind of handle end of conversation. Maybe this person times out and they don't say anything else. They got their answer. Cool, they left. We handle the end of the conversation that way. Or likewise, if they want to follow that up, as often happens in a conversation, right? It's not just a one-turn event. They're going to come back here to this initialized turn, and we're going to run back through the pipeline with the kind of updated context and information that a user said. So with all of that in mind, let's jump into actually what one of these nodes looks like. So from the beginning, we've gone through the assign node. We've sent like a disclaimer message, and I'll show you this in a minute. But this is kind of the first step where we're really getting into the meat of what we're doing. And what we're going to do here is you'll see that we have 6 prompts running at once. So a user says something, and we're gonna perform 6 kind of classifications and ask the LLM to do 6 different jobs. And rather than doing one prompt where we ask it to do all 6 things and give us output of 6 different items, we're gonna ask it to do one thing at a time. And the way I explain this to people is that if I asked you to do 6 different tasks and I upfront listed all those 6 tasks and gave you the nuance of each of them and all of that, and then said, okay, go do it. If you asked me to do that, I would forget what, I don't know, 3 of those are. And not that a language model functions exactly the same way as a human does, but if you can think of it that way, you can understand why we want to start to break those tasks down. So it has a lot of benefits, right? We're going to not only ask the language model to perform these individual discrete tasks, where it's going to do them, it's going to classify them better because it's only doing one thing, but it's also going to save on inference time. So rather than having to do a search phrase and then a sensitive prompt and then a detect language prompt and in like sequential order, we can do them all at once. And so this whole process only takes as long as the longest prompt here. And so we can save on inference time by doing so. And then another big benefit of this is that we can choose the model. So if I want to run, say I know, I often describe my job as talking to language models all day, every day. It's not quite true. Sometimes I talk to people, but when I'm working with a language model, I get to know them. You get to know what the strengths or the weaknesses of a given model are. And so maybe I know that this creation of a search phrase is really good with Claude, right? And then maybe the sensitive is good, or Gemini is better with classifying whether it's sensitive or not, and maybe Llama is better at the goal phrase. And so whatever that looks like, you can not only get better responses because you're asking for a singular task, you can save on inference time, and you can choose the model that's best for a given job. So that's kind of that's been a big learning of ours as we build with these models, is that it's a tool that helps you get to the end result you need. And so the more flexibility you have in using that tool, the better. So if I want to switch models, or if I want to add an additional classification up front, I can do all of that right here within the flow editor. So once that's happened, we're going to go through, we're going to start to find our information. This is where I hit that vector database, right? And then I move on. Here we're going to filter. So we're going to go from, here's 10 articles that are related, but related is not necessarily relevant. So we're going to ask it a model to filter. And for instance, I actually happen to know that Claude is currently quite good at filtering that data. And so I might use Claude here to filter my semantically similar or related articles down to that which is relevant, that I'm going to have the agent actually use to accomplish a task or to answer a user's question. So without going through the entire pipeline step by step, I just want you to see that it goes from left to right. It gives me a bunch of flexibility to add business rules, to add routing. Say you start offering a sale and you have a promo code, and the promo code, if somebody mentions it, you want it to go direct to an agent. We can look for those keywords, or we can ask a prompt to classify whether you're talking about that and direct you straight to an agent. We can take you to seasonal sales guides based on the time of day, perhaps, that you come into an agent. All of these things give us flexibility to build based on business rules, and the things that define what your business or your use case does. And then after that, we're going to come up here, and a pretty important part of using language models is the ability to detect hallucinations, right? To be able to know that what we're sending is safe, it's grounded in truth, it's been verified. And so we use a couple of different NLI models here. So the NLI models have been purpose tuned to kind of compare two statements to each other and see if they agree. And so what we do is we pull out what somebody or what an agent has said, and we also look at the data and we say, is what the agent said verified by the data? If so, we move on. If not, we can handle that however a given business might choose to do so. And so we're going to end up then coming down here and aligning the answer, kind of giving it its final instructions and what to send off to a user. So if I want to test this as I'm building, which, as I said earlier, it's a very iterative process, right? I am constantly going back and forth and working to make improvements or to make tweaks and changes and all of that as I build. So if I open my chat panel here and I just drop in a note, if I order a bike with you, this is I think I mentioned earlier, a fictional Cannondale bike retailer store, appropriately named Quicksilver Bikes. So we've got some Cannondale knowledge base built in on the back, which is what we had looked at during transformations. And I'm just going to say, if I order a bike with you, does it come already assembled? And can I finance it? So I'm asking a couple different questions, right? And so we've got kind of our static node here, where this is maybe it's legally required. You have to say exactly this every time. You don't want any ambiguity. So we can build in static messaging if we want to. And then here's where I'm going to start to get my answer. And the interesting part here is that not only am I getting an answer for both my questions, which is fantastic, I'm also getting a link that goes out to the knowledge base article that is relevant for the question that I'm asking. So all that's built into the pipeline, but what I want to show is this this event as it happened. So I'm actually going to zoom out real quick. As we go from left to right in this prompt pipeline, we're going to take an event, and I can see I can see the date and time just now, that this is what the user said, and this is what was the agent responded with. But I can see every single thing that happened during that user turn. So I can see where we classified it. Is it sensitive or not sensitive? And I can see, let's close this part. You've seen that now. This is my prompt. This is the model I'm hitting. This is the entirety of the prompt, and then I'm getting a completion here from the model. I can see the number of tokens, I can see the duration, I can see all that, and then I'm using that information that kind of that parallel atomic prompt. I've asked it to do it one discrete task. I've set a field to no, it's not sensitive, and then I kind of move on in the pipeline. And I might use this later. I might use sensitivity, or I might use a search phrase later in the conversational turn to route a conversation or to perform some action. So I'm using the model, the language model, to build up. I kind of break down the task into individual components, and then I use those components to kind of build up the conversation as I go, and to route and to do things in the conversation that are necessary based on those classifications. And so we'll end up with a bunch of things here. And then this is where I'm gonna kind of meld points 2 and 3, where we're building an AI agent. Now we're kind of moving into testing and observability, because it really is, it's very, very iterative. So when I think about testing and observability, I think of not only doing it at build time, and I think about doing it kind of post-production, once it's launched and kind of live out in the wild. And we'll get into that part in a minute. That we'll talk about that. But for right now, something that's really interesting to me as an AI engineer when I work on this is that if I need to change my prompt, I need to know what happens when I change my prompt. Did my answer go from good to bad? Did it go from like okay to better? What happens when I change a prompt, or when I add in a new business rule, or whatever that might be? And so there's a couple tools I can use to do that. One, I can just come in here and I could like, let's say, sensitive, and I want to switch the model, and let's say I switch it to GPT-4, or I switch it to Claude. I can hit this replay button here, and immediately I'm just going to be able to replay it. I'm going to be able to hit that other model, or I'm going to be able to have a difference in prompt, and I'm going to be able to see what the difference is. Now, I didn't change anything here for the purposes of the demo, but you can see it. I can go back and forth between the original or the replay, and then I've got a nice tool here to compare the replay. Right. And so it's a generative answer, and you can see just based on length, it's a slightly different answer from the original to the replay. And that becomes more pronounced as I change my prompt. So you could change the prompt however maybe you need, like an over-the-top friendly greeting at the top of every answer, and you add that in as your prompt, and you can start to see what those differences are from the original to the replay. And so I can also see, I can get all the way down to the granularity of how many tokens, or request tokens, response tokens total, and time it took. So maybe I shorten my prompts because I feel like it's a little long, and so I get it down, and I can start to build over time by iterating and replaying all of these events. Kind of once I've done that, maybe that is useful as I'm building, to just quickly replay things and see if it fixed a given issue, or if it helped me get closer to an answer I want. But what if I wanted, I don't know, GPT-4 is being deprecated, and that's what we're using, and we need to move up to a new model, or you are a bike store that now offers tours, and you want to make sure that people that are asking about buying bikes don't get offered answers about tours. You need a series of tests that are going to help you build and help you iterate and help you deploy updates and changes with confidence, right? So I think about tests in 2 different ways. One, at the prompt level. So I've got that sensitivity prompt. Is something sensitive or not sensitive? It's a pretty easy yes or no. I want to have a bunch of test cases around that, so that I can come in here and I can just hit this button, and it's green because I just did this before we started. And I'm replaying these tests, and it's giving me confidence now that I know, right, that all of my sensitivity tests have passed. And what that looks like is, this is an event. This is a conversation that I had earlier in the day. I saved it off as a test within the sensitivity test set. And I said, I built an assertion on, is it sensitive? No. Right. And so I can see I've got, just for demo purposes, here's 4 of them: 2 where it got classified as no, 2 where it got classified as yes. And what that looks like is I can do that event that we just had here. I can come in and I can look at the sensitivity, and what did I ask? I said, if I order a bike with you, does it come already assembled? That's not a sensitive topic, right? And and we can see the sensitivity got classified as no. What I can do is I can create a test case, and we'll just call this, we'll put it in the sensitivity test set, and we'll just call this demo. I'm going to save it. It pops me over to the screen. I can see it, I can run it, and then I can build an assertion based on every single field that's been set during that turn. So here I can see sensitivity, no. Click here, I've got an assertion for no. Some of that additional agency that we've built, I'm building and establishing an initial user goal is the guide that helps me get to that more agentic AI. And the reason I mention that is I couldn't add test sets around any of these things. And now when I replay this or when I run this test, I can see whether things hit or don't. And if I come in here and I see some red X's, then I know something has been something has regressed. So by building these regression tests, I give myself the ability to build and deploy changes confidently, knowing that I haven't messed up anything that was previously working. Likewise, I build end-to-end tests. And so what this one does is it says, this is what a user said, and this is what the agent responded with. And we use that same NLI model that we use to detect hallucinations. You can come up here. My assertion is that, let me expand this for us to see, that my message to the user should be very similar to this. And I can set my score, and you'll get used to these NLI models, minimum to maximum score, detecting a hallucination. And what we're honestly doing here is we're seeing, when I replay this, is the answer a hallucination based on what the previous answer was or not? We're just comparing to make sure. So you can have these prompt level tests that help you test all of the various components of a given conversation. And you can have an end-to-end test that lets you build an assertion on that final answer. Because ultimately, for a user, that's what matters, right? You said thing A, and agent responded with thing B, and over time, you want to make sure that that stays the same. So if I add new knowledge in here, or I change my model, or any host of other things, I can run this test and know that my agent is still saying the same thing it was previously. So I did talk a little bit about that that guide, and I do want to just show this real quick, that when I'm prompting here, I'm going to close a couple of these. Here you can see where we're doing the prompting, and I can, because I'm doing it here in Python, I can pull in variables from various places of my code. I can hit the LLM in a way that makes sense with the data that I need for a given prompt. So the flexibility offered here is really nice. I can run, different functions to determine things as I need to in my flow editor, and kind of use all of that within the tool to build the agent and then test and observe. If I came into an event and I wanted to see truly everything that got sent off to a model, I can even see the entire prompt. I can see the completion. I can see everything that's happening. So when I'm building, if a customer comes and says, hey, this thing happened and we don't understand why, I can just pop over here into the debug workbench, and I can look and see every single thing that happened during a user turn. And in doing that, I can then deploy changes that make sense to fix a given issue. And then I can use those tests and that observability to make sure that that nothing has regressed in making that change. So that's a lot in there. I honestly, that's me going pretty quick. I could talk about this stuff all day, but that's largely how we build and how we test and observe kind of during the build and post build. And like I talked about earlier, the kind of that last step is the step 4, the general flexible analytics. So once you've deployed this thing, you want to be able to see what it looks like out in the real world. You want to be able to monitor its performance. You want to be able to see that it's doing the things that you want. So as I'm building and kind of thinking about the architecture up front, I'm building in a way that allows me to measure those KPIs and those metrics that are important to me. And then after the fact, I'm going to be looking at reports. So having the reports built right into the tool is crucial. I can see kind of all sorts of things, and we won't get into the specifics of these because this is a demo data, right? But I can set goals in conversations, and we can see where those are being achieved or not achieved. I can then I can build funnels, right? I can build funnels that show me, I'm obviously looking at demo data here, that show me how a conversation flows from one step to the next to the end. I can click in at any point and I can see the actual transcripts of those conversations, right? I can see in here, I can get down into, this is everybody who got, or this is everybody who talked about a warranty, right? And I can click in and I can actually review these conversations. And so in doing so, it helps me see what what's happening kind of out in the real world with real conversations so that I can read through them. I can make decisions on them. I can go back into the agent. I can make those tweaks, rely on my tests, and kind of quickly and iteratively deploy things to production. So I think I covered all 4 steps there. Those are really that's kind of the start to finish build process and then monitoring process that we go through on an everyday basis here using AI Studio. And I think that pretty well covers it.
Awesome. Thank you, John. That was great. Let's wrap up and take a look at all the value you get from AI Studio. So with AI Studio, you really get the best of build and buy, and hopefully what John just demoed highlighted that. You get a highly flexible generative AI platform that enables builders and business stakeholders to build, test, deploy, and optimize generative AI experiences without being constrained by limited use cases or limited access to models. You're on really solid footing with a platform that enables you to safely and confidently build and scale AI agents across channels, with different integrations and with different use cases. And you've got an enterprise-ready foundation that enables you to focus on solving your unique challenges, helping your customers, and not focus on the underlying infrastructure, managing model and channel compatibility, security, and much more.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Max. And that wraps up the webinar that we have and the information that we are presenting. But we want to leave you with just a few final points. And some of those points are Quiq's AI Studio is really the fastest and safest way to build your enterprise-ready AI agents. And really, we want to encourage you to consider a buy to build type of strategy. Buy a solution that will allow you to build whatever type of solutions you want, or if you ever need help, that people like John at our company are willing to help you and get you on your way, so that you're not taking a long period of time before you can get these out and get the advantage of agentic AI in your enterprise. We want to encourage you to go to the top of the screen and get access to AI Studio. When you get that access, you will be able to receive a bunch of information, our Quiq knowledge database, and our developer knowledge base, all at the same time. We have videos for you to watch, and we can help you get on your way. All of this is going to be given to you at absolutely no cost for you to be able to try this out and to test it and to see just how easy it is to make your AI agents and all implement agentic AI into your enterprise.
Yep. And in addition to that platform access Mark just called out, we're also hosting office hours every Thursday for folks in that AI Studio trial cohort. That'll be every Thursday for the month of January at 11 a.m. Eastern, to help answer any questions you have as you're working through those lessons, questions about building, anything John just covered. We'll be happy to talk to you in more depth during those sessions every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern.
That's great. Thank you for your help, John and Max, and we thank you for attending and watching this video. Thank you.